Hello, welcome to the UK Gravel Collective Cycling Podcast, from now on known as the UGC Podcast. And tonight's episode is with a guy I met last year at a bike launch, and his name is John Hurd. And he and his son Jonathan run a company called Wild Cycles. So here's what he had to say. Welcome to the UK Gravel Collective Cycling Podcast. I must think of a shorter version of that because it's a big mouthful. I heard
No worries.
UKGC podcast is probably better. Anyway, so on today's episode, I've got John Hurd, who is one of two people involved in a company called Wild Cycles. And I first met John when I was invited down to a bike launch with 1816 bikes, and Wild Cycles were hosting it for this company. I think that's right. Is that
That's
right, John?
right, yeah. 1816 and Gravel Apparel,
That's it.
sister brands.
And yeah, it was pretty. We had a great weekend of riding and the catering as well, and it was such a good vibe that at the time I asked John if it would be okay to do a little interview for my website, ukgravelcode.com, and he graciously accepted. So this is sort of a live version of that, but what I'd like to do is go into a bit more detail about yourself, John. But first of all, can you describe Wild Cycles and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Gary. Thanks for the opportunity to chat about Wild Cycles. We've been going for about 3 years now, and we developed the idea for the business, ironically, at the start of the pandemic as we entered the first lockdown. Jonathan, my son, who's the co-founder of Wild Cycles, came home. He was on furlough, so he came home to our home here in the Chilterns. So we sort of just northwest of London, and we have the benefit of having on our doorstep the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty. It is a gem of an area, so not very well known area, and we thought that it would be a great opportunity just to have this area on the map, and create a little bit more interest in the area and sort of start to position it as a cycling destination. So one thing led to another, and we started to develop the idea for the business. Jonathan, my son, he was home, so we just started off just riding myriad of routes in this area. It's a mixed terrain. So you have sort of mountain bike. Actually, there's a mountain bike trail at Aston Clinton, sort of a downhill course, and then you have sort of crisscrossing this whole area, a myriad of off-road trails and really pretty decent road rides as well.
Yeah.
But we started to ride the gravel and the mountain bike trails, and recorded those, and started to publish them on Commute. And in this phase, we were really looking to sort of just, as I said, position the Chilterns as a cycling destination and start to build awareness of the Wild Cycles brand. And it evolved from there. It coincided with, as I said, the lockdown, at which point people were unable to travel abroad. People were starting to discover more sort of natural beauty on their doorstep. As you may
Yeah.
have heard, sort of anecdotally during lockdown,
Yeah. Yeah.
people started, wander out, out of the back door sort of thing and discover there was an amazing sort of forest or meadow right on their doorstep.
Yeah.
And so we really started to capitalize on that and develop the idea for the business, which also coincided with the increase in popularity of gravel cycling. By then, it had been sort of established in the US, I believe, started to sort of take a foothold here in the UK. So it was really the conversion of those three paths
Yeah.
that led us to develop the Wild Cycles business.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, just rambling on here, but in a nutshell, the aim of Wild Cycles is to really make cycling, riding in beautiful places more accessible. The idea came to us, as I said, as a result of the convergence of those sort of trends, those paths. But also it occurred to me that some people, we are very close to London. It occurred to me that there are lots of folk in London that might want to. They may have heard of gravel cycling, or they may have heard of the Chilterns, but weren't able to sort of put that whole package together. So
Yeah,
yes, I want to go exploring in wide open spaces, explore a bit of natural beauty that
yeah,
surrounds us. But I'm not sure where to ride. I don't have a bike. I wouldn't know where to start and finish.
yeah.
So really, those are the key criteria that we're looking to satisfy,
Well,
making it easier for people just to venture out and
yeah,
explore.
that's the thing. It's you've got local knowledge, and there's no better source for trails and stuff than a local who's riding them anyway. So, I mean, you could go to somewhere that you don't really know and spend like 50% of your time trying to find decent riding, and you've sort of wasted your day then. So if you can find someone local, that's what I like to do, is like go and ride other people's trails when they show you, and they come down here and we show them our trails. So it's
Yes.
that sort of vibe, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I
No,
can
absolutely.
I can definitely attest, because the bike launch for 1816 was in the Chilterns. And I was surprised how diverse the area is, because you've got sort of open moorland, you've got forest
Yeah, yeah.
sections, you've got what the Americans will call a traditional gravel road, you've got all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's great
Yeah, no,
riding there.
yeah, it's a gem of an area, and we've had a lot of people coming out of London, and they come from all over the country, and in fact abroad as well. A lot of people are really struck by natural beauty and the wide open spaces and the views, far-reaching views, that really and less than an hour out of London. So you can drive out, or you can hop on a train in Euston and be at Tring Station in 40 minutes.
Yeah,
And from there, you are on these magical trails. We've got Ashridge Estate, which we rode on that 1816 launch. We rode a bit of that. It is a sort of a
and
maze of
it's
footpaths and
Ivanhoe
bridleways.
Beacon as well, is it?
And then you also have, I think I was just going to say Ivanhoe Beacon, which is the sort of landmark, which offers these spectacular sort of 360-degree views of the surrounding landscape. And that, by the way, is also the start or the finish of the Ridgeway, which is one of the routes that features in one of our tours,
Yeah,
where you actually start. We start at the opposite end, which is down at Avebury Stones, and you've got a roughly 100-mile route following Britain's oldest road. It's basically an old Roman road that they used to transport livestock and armies up and down there in Roman times.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that has now become an iconic route, and one of those sort of bucket list routes that a lot of people want to do. And that finishes at Ivanhoe Beacon, which is where we sort of stopped off on that Chiltern weekend.
But it's not
No, so it's
just,
really a beautiful area.
and so it's not just people come to you to go for a ride. You're actually also catering for them as well.
Indeed. So at its sort of base level, we um, invite people to come and join us for a ride. So we do guided rides, also do a bit of coaching. We've got a session that we call Introduction to Gravel Riding, just teaching people the basics. A lot of people that we encounter are sort of transitioning from road into gravel. So we teach them some of the basics, just enables people to get more of out of their off-road riding, a bit more confidence,
Yeah,
so that they can enjoy it more. But to your question, Gary, we do multi-day rides. We've got a number of packages, amongst others, what we used to call a gravel camp, which is the one we did for you and the rest of the gang who came over to the 1816 and gravel apparel launch. So
yeah,
it's essentially two days of riding out and back, following a circular route in the Chilterns, with an overnight camp in the middle. So we choose these iconic campsites with beautiful great facilities and beautiful views of the surrounding landscape. We've got a whole sort of camping setup, like a canvas village,
Yeah,
comprising bell tents, fully equipped bell tents, field kitchen, where we can cook anything from pizzas to barbecues, catering to diverse sort of palate. But we talk a lot about the cycling, and obviously it is about riding in beautiful places. We absolutely insist on routes that are designed to really excite and amaze, in terms of natural beauty. But equally important is what we sort of call a sort of off the bike experience. So you come back from your ride, to a really beautifully laid out campsite, complete with deck chairs, cold beer or cold drinks, barbecues or pizza, catering to sort of diverse palates, diverse sort of dietary preferences, and just sitting around the campfire. So campfire is essential part of the whole experience, and just having a chat with fellow adventurers in the evening,
yeah,
and
yeah.
sharing stories. That's
Yeah,
part of the
well,
magic.
I think I also came to your Wild Wales weekend. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay over. I only came for one day. But
Yeah.
what struck me the most, apart from the amazing scenery and the riding, which you arranged, obviously, it's just the
Of
vibe.
course.
It's just the vibe. I mean, I've done gravel
Yeah.
events, which they always say it's sort of a relaxed ride, but it always ends up being a sort of a competitive thing where where people are
Uh-huh.
timed on different sections. But it was nothing like that on your
Uh-huh.
weekend. Um, there was such a diverse group of abilities and sexes, and it was just really chilled.
Yeah.
And you just, if you wanted to ride around on your own because you got the route, you could do. If you wanted to ride with someone who's going at exactly the same pace as you could do.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I liked about it, because it's you could just be yourself. There was no time
Yeah.
pressure, and that's what I think sets your events apart from probably 95%
Mhm.
of all the others.
Yeah. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that, Gary, and very pleased that you were able to join us for at least part of it, and to really experience, the Wild Cycles experience. And what you've just described is really that's it really encapsulates Wild Cycles. We want, and we certainly design our experiences in such a way that they are inclusive, they are accessible, so in terms of wide range of abilities. So I'm really pleased to hear that we satisfy that particular need, or that
Yeah,
sort of criteria, because that's exactly what we endeavor to do, is to encourage people to come along, and for some people it is really sort of stepping a bit out of their comfort zone, because
yeah,
take Wales as an example. The terrain and the gradients are quite radical, and quite extreme for some people. If they're accustomed to doing laps of Richmond Park gravel,
yeah,
for
yeah,
example, it
yeah,
will be quite a shock for them to come to Wales.
yeah,
Because you've got a mix of gradients and terrain and mud. But what really, what makes me so happy is when I hear people coming back after a ride, um, and to say things like, "Oh wow, I really loved that. I didn't know I was capable of doing that. I surprised myself."
yeah,
And really, and that alone just gives people the confidence. If I can do that, then I can do something else, and perhaps something even more challenging.
yeah,
So that
yeah,
that delights. If we hear comments like that, that, as far as we're concerned, is sort of mission accomplished, because it gives people an opportunity to explore new places, but to also discover something new about themselves. And for us, that's very, very delightful.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know on the Wild Wales ride, we stopped probably mid ride at a pub. I think it was called the 100 House, I think.
Oh yes,
But
yes.
one of the riders had a puncture, but they didn't realise it until we were about to leave. and I think we
Uh-huh.
probably sat there having a beer for an hour, and we're like, well, we're all ready to leave, and she's like, oh no, I've got a flat tire. And I think there were probably 15 people offered to help her. And so,
Oh, wow.
everyone mucked in together.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's
but it turned
fantastic.
out she just swapped the tube herself, got
Uh-huh.
on with it,
Uh,
and
well,
we
there,
were off
that's
then.
that's the spirit. That's the
Yeah,
spirit. And
exactly.
I mean, on that note, in the evening, we have a meal together. It's provided by Hamish, who runs the farm, and his family. And his boy is actually playing a folk band. So unfortunately, you missed that, but that's very much part of the whole vibe. Is the folk music that sort of just wafts up from this iconic little campsite. But just to sort of come back to the point you made about the spirit of the event. We had one person come along who she lives on a farm in Cambridgeshire.
Hmm.
Her parents farm apples, so she brought a basket of apples and shared that with everyone. And that also just so beautifully illustrates the spirit of Wild Wales and what we try to do as Wild Cycles, which is get people to come along, really meet new folk, have community and
Yeah,
share. So we love to see that sort of thing happening, and thankfully there's plenty of that going on.
cool. So let's put Wild Cycles aside for a second. Tell me
Sure.
about yourself, because listeners, obviously listening in, can hear that your accent probably isn't from the UK. So
Yes.
what's your history in cycling, and where does John Hurd come from?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Zimbabwe and moved out to Cape Town, South Africa at a very young age. It was sort of in my late teen years that I started to take cycling quite seriously. One of my best school pals was from Belgium, and he had immigrated with his family, and had all of the sort of the proper, pro cycling paraphernalia with him.
Yeah,
So that really was an introduction to. Um, it was competitive cycling. It wasn't professional. It was competitive
yeah,
road cycling. So I started that in my late teens. Then I went in those days. One was obliged to do national service in South Africa. So I did 2 years. I was called up to 2 years in the Defence Force. Ended up in the Air Force, which is a bit of a lucky draw. Um, and because at that time the whole setup, the national service was very much inclined towards people that had a sport. You enjoyed all sorts of privileges, so down to places to park your bike securely, great food and accommodation. So I had 2 years of almost semi-professional cycling, courtesy of the Defence Force cycling team.
yeah.
So that's when I really got into it proper. So I started to race at a club level, then at a provincial level. That would be the equivalent of a county level, and then internationally as well. And I did that pretty intensively for 10 years, and I sort of almost buried myself in road cycling. Started off as an amateur, um, a couple of years after entering the sort of the competitive realm. I was chosen to represent South Africa in the Springbok team. So I
Wow.
rode in the Springbok team for a couple of years, and we had at that time a sort of an international stage race called the Report Tour. It's sort of a South African mini version of the Tour de France. So it's over 2 weeks,
Yeah.
covering roughly 2,000 kilometers over 10 days of cycling.
Wow.
And traditionally, it would have been from Johannesburg to Cape Town, split over a number of stages. In later years, they started to sort of split it up with sort of transitions in between. So it was more concentrated around the high density sort of population areas. So I did that, as I said, for Springbok team 2 years. And then in my last 2 years, I rode professionally. So I rode in a pro team for 2 years. Also in South Africa, rode national and international races there. And then the last thing I did, which was really very much an aspiration of most South African cyclists, competitive cyclists, was to race in Europe.
Yeah.
and that was the place to be. So either Belgium or France.
Yeah.
And so I chose France. I got hooked up with a club in the east of France. Met a very very hospitable family who hosted me for a season. So I ended up racing again. It was back to sort of amateur league
Yeah.
in the east of France in the area called Alsace. So I did that for a season. Quite a shock to the system, I must say, because in South Africa we were accustomed to bunches of maybe 50, 60, 80 maximum. I found myself sort of flying along at ludicrous speed through the lanes of eastern France in bunches that would be typically 100, 150, if not more.
Yeah.
And the speed was just absolutely frightening. So, but it was good fun. I really loved it. And so that was my cycling career, sort of 10 years of it, and then stopped or pretty much abruptly decided I needed to get a proper job, got into advertising. And that's where I've remained for the next sort of 20 or so years. And then sort of fast forward to Wild Cycles. So when I was made redundant about 3 years ago, I thought, well, this was just like the nudge that I needed to start something, get back into cycling. And
Yeah, well, it's clear that you're passionate about cycling, but not just about cycling, about the whole sort of scene and encouraging other people. Because I witnessed you talking to people on the 2 weekends, and your enthusiasm does come across. Yeah, it's good to see. Um,
uh,
so, you do a weekend,
um,
but you also do sort of mini tours as well. Can you tell me about
yes, yes.
those?
So yeah, certainly. So I mentioned the gravel camp, which was really our first tour or product that we launched with, as I said, about 3 years ago. That then sort of evolved into these multi-day tours. So we are typically picking up on existing routes. I mentioned the Ridgeway, which we do over 2 days with 2 nights of camping. So we provide the camp setup that provide the routes, the split routes, so people can just ride and enjoy the scenery
Okay,
and
so
arrive at the
so
camp
they don't,
everything's set up for them.
so you don't need to bring your own tent.
No, we provide that, and some people we used to actually call it bikepacking until someone said, "Well, hang on, that's not really bikepacking."
Yeah.
Because we don't have we're not carrying our own gear, so I now like to call it's bikepacking without the packing, because
Yeah.
all the stuff gets loaded, all the gear gets loaded into our van, which we then transfer from one campsite to another. So
Yeah.
in essence, you arrive in the morning or the evening, have a meal, then set off the next day, have a lovely day in the saddle, enjoying the beautiful scenery, arrive at the camp, food, drink is all provided for you. Campfire, as I said, is obligatory. Have a nice nice rest, comfy bell tents, and then head off the next day. So, for example, one of our other tours is the King Alfred's Way, which is a circular route starting and finishing in Winchester. You may have heard of it. In fact,
Yeah.
it's become so popular, quite
Yeah. Yeah.
iconic now.
Yeah.
We do that over 4 days, but that's got some, you know, it's stunning scenery. One of the people that did it recently said it's like being in a different country every day, sort of thing, because it's so beautiful. You've got Salisbury Plain, which is quite remote, then you've got the Ridgeway, you've got a bit of Surrey, and then it finishes on the South Downs Way. So we do that one over 4 days. We've got a beautiful route in Cornwall, sort of West Cornwall, where we pick up the majority of the West Kerno Way, which is a route that Cycling UK designed. So we've modified that into a 3 day tour again with camping. Then we're doing South Downs Way, where we're collaborating with Mason Cycles on a 2 day South Downs Way tour. And then you've mentioned Wild Wales, which is now almost become a bit of a sort of a flagship for Wild Cycles.
Yeah.
Wild Wales,
Yeah.
which is 2 days of cycling in beautiful Wales mountain landscape with this iconic base camp with the fires, the folk music and great food and great community, great company to go with it.
So, do you find that you get jealous that you're having to set up camp and then put the camp down and then drive to the next location? You don't get to ride all the routes.
I have ridden all the routes at a point in time. We recce all of the routes, either at the outset or at the beginning of a new season. So yes, I would love to do a bit more cycling. But I do get to do the recce's, and sometimes, say for instance, on King Alfred's Way, once I've set up the camp, they're usually a few hours to kill, at which point I'll have a bike with me, and then I will go and explore part of the route, or I'll ride up the route in the reverse direction and meet the riders as they come in. But I'm more than rewarded when people arrive and are just sort of glowing about the day that they've had
Yeah.
on the these most beautiful routes.
So, what sort of people turn up for your events? If you were a complete beginner, would it be suitable for them, or do you need a certain level of fitness?
I would say the level, we do a number of our rides and events are specifically geared for a very diverse sort of audience. So for example, Wild Wales, the sort of thing you could come along to with minimal experience, because there's a short route, there's a sort of a 30k route, and you can just do a sort of a
Yeah.
bimble around the the local farm. And but for something like King Alfred's Way, it's 240 miles. For that, you would require, what we would say sort of a moderate level of fitness and skill. It's very mixed terrain. It has got some quite severe gradients, sort of descents and ascents as well. So I'd say you should tackle the King Alfred's Way, which is one of the longer rides with a good level of fitness. West Kerner Way is similar. It's quite technical in places, as is South Downs Way. So I'd say the gravel camp that we do out of the Chilterns is, I'd say, better suited to sort of beginner level. And on that one, we do a bit of tutoring. We provide a bit of an introduction to gravel riding,
Okay. Yeah.
develop some skill, build confidence for off-road riding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'd say Wild Wales is another sort of gateway type event to doing
Yeah.
something more
Yeah.
daring, more
Well,
long distance.
yeah, definitely the Wild Wales. Although there are some descents and some climbs. From what I saw, they're not overly technical, unless you're going really fast. And then I suppose you can just pace yourself then.
Yes. Exactly. There are bits that are, some people would rather walk because they perceive that to be a bit too challenging. But
Yeah.
as you point out, Gary, there's some people that just tend to sort of go low flying over the terrain and
Yeah.
hardly touch the ground in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, that's what
Yeah.
I
But
liked.
it's
I liked
the Wild
about
West is,
that's what I liked about the event. Like, if you wanted to walk, that was
yeah,
fine. No one batted an eyelid. There was no
yeah,
stigma into
yeah,
either
yeah,
walking or having the wrong sort of bike, or people get quite snobby in some of these events, but there was none of that
yeah.
on
Well,
yours.
yeah. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that, because that is something that we absolutely do not want to be, which is, exclusive or selective or snobby. That would be the last thing we'd want to
Yeah.
be. We really want people to come along and, as I said, really discover something new, and perhaps encourage them to go out and venture further afield.
Yeah. And also, I have to mention the catering as well. But I think it's your wife that does a lot of it. So I remember
Yes,
on the
yes,
first
indeed.
event, when we were having breakfast, and she turned up with still warm sourdough bread, which was I didn't really want to go on the ride. I could have just sat there and ate the bread for a couple of hours.
Yeah,
And then the
yeah.
apple strudel in Wild Wales.
Ah,
So these are
well,
these are the standout things that I remember.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, there's a bit of German there. So she grew up in a Swiss German household,
Ah,
so
okay.
there was always a cake or a sourdough bread baking.
Yeah,
And yeah, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that because the cycling and the beautiful scenery and sort of giving it a go, we really concentrate on every detail. So when we are catering for events, well, which we do pretty much every event now, we want it to be memorable. So I'm very pleased to hear that it was indeed memorable
yeah,
for you. We
yeah,
want people to come away with the, that sort of holistic experience of great experience, food, company, rides. So I'm glad to hear that was a sort of a standout moment for you.
yeah. Well, there's nothing better than riding an epic route. You've had a great day, and then you sit down in front of an open fire, and someone is feeding you and giving you beer. So it's like there are no downsides to
What
that.
more could you wish for?
No, nothing at all.
Yeah, yeah.
So your events, are you planning anything different? I know you do the Kerno Way, and you do the Ridge Way. Have you got anything secret in the pipeline for next year, or what are your plans for Wild Cycles in the future?
In the future, we want to do more of the same and perhaps do it even better each time, and just make sure that everybody that comes on one of our rides is just blown away by the whole experience. So to answer your question, we are constantly evolving, the business, evolving the ride. So this year is slightly different to last year, and next year will be slightly different again. Wild Wales has become almost a template. It's proven to have worked really well. So we want to do more of that. What we will certainly be doing is sort of envisage is a sort of a Wild Wales. Cornwall, will, although it's very much based on West Kerner Way, that will become our Wild Cornwall. We're going to do a Wild Scotland. We were
Oh, great.
introduced to the wonders of the Galloway,
Yeah,
that area by we were introduced by Aled, the guys at Stoke Brewery, who are one of our partners and sponsors.
yeah,
They took us up there late last year. We met with Warren and Esther, lovely folk who run Galloway Cycling Holidays. They've been instrumental in putting Galloway on the gravel map, as it happens,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I can see why, because it is absolutely stunning. You start off at Gateway, or the Gatehouse of Fleet, and then you've got what must be hundreds and hundreds of miles of gravel, but it's like proper gravel.
yeah.
And they ran the Raiders there last year, and then I think they've got a UCI event happening there this
Oh,
year.
right.
Are you familiar with the area at all?
I've been mountain biking in the actual, the trail centres, but never the sort of natural stuff. But yeah, yeah, it's
Right.
it's it
Well,
is
this
it
I
is a
would highly
stunning
recommend.
area.
Yeah, just highly recommended. As I said to a lot of people, it's sort of Galloway. It's that little sort of sticky outy, but just under or just south of Glasgow,
Yeah,
and it's sort of place where you drive through to get somewhere, like to the Highlands or the Cairngorms,
yeah,
and unbeknownst to most people, best kept secret is this area of outstanding natural beauty. The Galloway Forest is actually the biggest sort of forest in the UK. It's also got this dark skies certification. So,
yeah,
it's renowned for its stunning starlights at night, northern lights at the right time of the year, and then, as I said, this endless maze of gravel routes. So we are going to do a sort of a trial run of that in October, and you'll be most welcome to join us for that.
oh, fab,
And then we will extend that into next year as well.
fabulous. You've got all these events, but I mean, are they expensive to join, or pointless to you revealing how much it costs? Because if someone listens to this in 3 years' time, it'll be totally different. But how are you
Yes.
how are you encouraging sort of a more diverse rider into it? 'Cause obviously, not everyone has got loads of money to spend on holidays and cycling. So how are you trying?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question, Gary, because something like Wild Wales, which we sort of build as a festival, and we position it as an experience that is accessible to sort of a wider and more diverse audience. So we are actively pursuing sort of community, cyclists, people that may not be your typical sort of middle-aged men in lycra sort of thing. Although we
Yeah,
do welcome them as well, of course. Um, but we've worked hard to design the experience in such a way that it is, it is accessible and be sort of attractive to an audience which includes people that might not have done a lot of off-road cycling.
yeah,
And then also, as far as the commercials are concerned, we've pushed the ticket price way down. So for a 2-day experience, that then includes 2 nights of camping, 2 days of sort of epic riding, meeting some great people, live music, and meal on Saturday night. We've pushed that price way down, so it's £95 for the weekend. And the way that we are able to do that really thanks to the generous support of a couple of sponsors, really people that have come on board.
yeah, yeah. Well,
They are what I would describe as sort of like-minded brands, so people that are, in the pursuit of adventure, or
yeah, yeah. Well, I
have
think
an
you
ethos.
I think you should name check them. Um,
Yes, indeed. So these are brands that we've come to know and love over the years. Instead, just for instance, Stoke, the bicycling brewing brothers at Stoke.
yep,
We've known them for a good few years now, and they actively involved in a lot of off-road cycling events. They love cycling themselves, so they are now integral to our experiences, essential ingredients as far as we are concerned.
yeah, yep,
Just having, a nice cold brew after a nice ride,
yep,
a nice hard ride in the trails. And then we've got commute. So, again, integral to all of our experiences. We
yeah,
design all of our routes on commute, and it's a great way of sharing these experiences, sharing the routes. They come on board as well. Again, sort of a like-minded sponsor, so they are not only integral to our experiences, but they are really essential to ensuring, a holistic experience,
yeah,
riding in wild and beautiful places. And then we've got Rob Equipment, sort of renowned for their outdoor gear. They've just recently launched a gravel cycling range called Cinder, so Rab Cinder. And we've had the benefit of putting some of the gear into action. It is pretty amazing, and what they've said, and we've now experienced this firsthand, that all of their knowledge they've put into sort of extreme adventure, sort of mountain climbing,
yeah,
sort of extreme and extraordinary adventures, they've applied to the cycling range. And I can attest to the fact that it works extremely well. We've been using it over the last couple of weeks.
yeah,
So they've come on board, and it's thanks to the people like that, brands like that, who we love and sort of grown up with. They've come on board, and it's thanks to their generous support that we are able to really make experiences like Wild Wales more accessible, more affordable,
yeah,
in an endeavor to attract more people and a more sort of diverse audience to these
yeah,
types of
yeah.
events.
I'm talking of diversity. I know that last year on the Wild Wales, you sort of ring fenced a certain amount of tickets for female and non-binary riders, and that's what the whole thing of the UK Gravel Collective
Yeah.
is about. Really, it's just to encourage
Uh-huh.
either new people or people who've not tried that sort of cycling before, and just to get bums on saddles. Really, so
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
Are you going to continue that sort of thing?
Absolutely. We have that same sort of model in place for 2023, and we'll certainly continue that uh, indefinitely. So that went down really well last year. And we're really pleased and very, very encouraged by the diversity that these types of events is attracting. And so long may that continue, and we remain wholeheartedly committed to that.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, well, it's great to know that you're going to continue doing this. It's and it seems to go from strength to strength. I know that I've recommended, especially Wild Wales, just for that chilled out vibe, to lots of people. Um, so hopefully well, I say hopefully you'll sell out, but then it sort of, when you sell out, it stops other people going. But it's exciting. It's exciting
Yes, it
about
is.
the Wild Scotland, because I think that would be absolutely epic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, there's just endless range of options for riding in Scotland. Starting off in Galloway, and the beauty of that area is that it's quite accessible. So you don't have to go all the way into the Highlands or into the Cairngorms. You can just stop off in the in Galloway, so it's a lot more accessible.
yeah. Yeah.
So we really are looking forward to that and trialing that later this year, and we hope you'll be able to join us for that.
Well, yeah. Send me the dates. I'll definitely make space for
We
that.
will do.
So if anyone
We will
wants
do.
to come on one of your rides, I presume you've got a website. If you want to name check that, is that the best way to contact
In,
you?
in, Indeed. So the website is www.wildcycles.co.uk. On there, you'll find a list of our gravel events, our gravel tours, our gravel rides. We also do some monthly rides in different parts of the country. It's a great way to get into the off-road riding, gravel
Yeah.
riding, and meet people. We're also on Instagram, wildcycles.cc, as well as on Facebook. And on email, if you want to just drop me an email, I'm at John at wildcycles.co.uk, and
Oh,
love to
that's
hear
good.
from you.
Just because what I was going to say is, if anyone sort of say they've got no one else to ride with, and they decided that they'd like to come, but they don't really want to be on their own, should they contact you just to discuss what the sort of the weekend or the riding's going to be? Because I know there are a lot of people who their partner really isn't into cycling, but they are,
Yeah,
and they sort of miss out because they can't, they can't go on, or they don't feel like it's appropriate to, turn up as
yeah.
on their own. So if anyone's got any questions like that, I suggest they email you. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Please do. And we really would encourage people to get in touch, because that's exactly what we want to encourage is people to come along, meet others. And so we have a lot of people coming along on their own, and go away with new friends, leave with
Yeah,
new friends. So that's absolutely what we want to encourage. So please
yeah.
feel free to get in touch, and we'd love to chat to you.
Okay, brilliant. Well, that's exactly what it's all about for me, especially.
Yeah.
Just meeting new people and encouraging people.
Likewise. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well,
No,
thanks very much,
likewise.
John. Thanks for coming on the podcast. And anyone listening, I'd
You.
encourage to check out Wild Cycles website. And as I said, and as John has said, if you've got a question about it, just drop in my line. And I said earlier that your enthusiasm comes across. And it's not just for the podcast. He really is like this in real life. And if you start a
No,
conversation with
no.
him over breakfast, then you're probably late to start the ride because, yeah,
Oh,
I think
well,
you've got quite a few
yeah,
stories.
you have to stop me from rambling on. But
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
very much,
Okay, then.
For the opportunity to come on to onto the podcast, and thanks very much for your support and your kind words. We're very much appreciated.
No, you're very welcome, John. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye for now.